Okay.
Welcome everyone to One Resource Floating, where we're going to talk about things today. And on the topic of things, we're also going to talk about stuff. Joining me today, we have this girl, whose name
Kayla.
is, and that guy with the backwards hat.
Ben. I see he was wearing a backwards hat.
And then we have a forward hat today, who is a newcomer on with us.
Hi, I'm Ogar.
And Ogar is a judge here and a prominent member of the Fab community. Part of the reason we brought him on today, and we are going to talk about all the competitive stuff, all the stuff that's going to happen this year. Actually, I said this year. I just meant like in a month, maybe 2
season.
months. This season.
The upcoming season, yeah.
The upcoming season. I'm not talking about fall.
We're talking about summer. Wait, we're in summer. We're talking about... First, we're going to
still
talk
in
about
summer.
Road to Nationals.
There we go.
Yep.
What do you guys know about Road to Nationals?
I know I'm gonna do a lot better than I did last year. Is my intent.
Good goal to have.
Last
That's-
year,
I'm-
month.
Yes, I've been playing for a month last year, so I'm a little more ready this year. We'll see how that goes.
Yep. Road to Nationals. I mean, it's basically in the title. It is a classic constructed series of events hosted at different locations for a short period of time, where the winner gets an invite to the national championships. So it's a road to nationals.
Yeah.
Quite a name.
Yeah, I actually was in a similar boat last year. I came to the game when everybody was still playing Blitz, so I was like really heavily on Levia, but she did not work in CC, which broke my heart. So then I had to scramble to find another deck as like right when Road to Nationals was happening last year, because I had not played CC yet, so that was tough and did not end up doing very well. So yeah, definitely also on the train of hoping that this year goes better. And I'm really curious how the draft portion, because some of the events this year are draft versus all of them being CC.
Yep.
So I'm pretty sure I'm going to participate in one draft, judge a draft, Road to Nationals, and then participate in a CC Road to Nationals. That's my intention. So I'm really curious to see how my performance differs from the draft one that I'll participate in versus the CC one.
That would be cool. So we haven't even drafted the new set yet.
I haven't done it yet either.
I didn't
That'll be
get
fun.
to participate in last year due to work, but I did watch our buddy Crass stream and win the Road to Nationals last year. So I was like sitting at work behind the counter, and people were like, "What are you watching?" And I'm like, "My friend kick butt in this card game." They're like, "Okay."
That he did.
That's awesome.
But I'm excited for this year. I think it's really cool that they're doing limited formats in it as well, because it's
I like
it's like if you are a player and you enjoy the game, but you're not like the type of person to fork out the hundreds of dollars it takes to sort of make a deck competitive on a high scale level, those limited formats are really going to help those people who truly do love and enjoy the game.
I don't think we have any drafts near us, though. Unfortunately, do we? I don't know
Not
what the nearest one is.
not in West Virginia, no. I mean, there's only 2 Road to Nationals in West Virginia, I think. The one in Hurricane and the one in Morgantown.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So,
Yeah, but skirmishes, I know there's more options.
I will say that I thought it was funny that you picked that right up, Kayla, because I'm used to just like saying a hero and then like you're the lore person, so I just turned right to you and you like went right away with it. And as soon as I said that, I was like, oh yeah, that was just habit that I did that. So, I will
At
say,
some point, there's like a certain amount of like milliseconds pass, and I'm like, this is where I interject.
I will say that anyone looking to go to the Road to Nationals event, aside from if you don't think you're going to get the fancy Road to Nationals, there is the option that if you get top 8, there are some cool things that you can get, like cold foil heroes. So I think first place gets like all 3 cold foils, and then like second, third, fourth gets like an either or.
No, I think it's first place gets Icelander,
Yeah.
and then second through 8th all get Fire Dromai.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Gotcha.
So there's 7 so there's like 3 or 4 5s and 3 or 4 Dromais, and then 1 Icelander for the winner. Which I think it's weird that Icelander is the one for the winner. I
Just
just
'cause it
want a
sticks out, I
5
guess.
personally. I want the 5. So
Oh
as
yeah,
long
give me
Like
the
I want
Dromai
the
between the three.
I want the shiny Dromai.
funny.
And you do have the participation. There's the foil that you also get just for playing. Sorry. Anyway, going in, let's talk about how to be successful and coming into these. So we'll talk about CC first because that's going to be what a lot of people play going into the competitive season. CC decks. And Kayla is going to start us off right here with something great.
I want to use a word other than successful because you might be putting people on this pedestal of you have to win. And I think it's more of have fun. Like,
Yeah, but
yeah,
that's like a different definition of success, right? Like
Yeah.
I honestly a lot of times think of I've had a successful day if I have a positive record at the end of the day. And some people are going to say I've had a positive day even if I just beat one person playing this deck.
yeah.
Sure.
I just want successful to not be you get first place.
Yeah.
I want
Oh
success
God,
to
no.
be you thought about
Did your
this,
best.
you said I'm going to give it my 100%, and I feel like that's being successful, not in the term of we're telling you that this is what you do to get first, because if someone's like, well, I did all this stuff and I didn't get first, and then like I want to stress that this is just to give you sort of like that little push to
And
Sure.
the path to greatness.
And I agree. And I would even weigh for myself, I'll just throw this in here. I think success is something like where I play the deck and I feel like there's no mistakes that I made other than I just had to do work with the draws. Sometimes like you can have bad draws, you can have great draws, but I worked the best of what was given to me, and I don't think I would change what I did. So
And you're gonna always have misplays and mistakes, but it is what it is. You fight through them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think actually one of the biggest measures of success for me is if whatever games I do lose, is there something I can learn from them and try to take that into future games, even if I'm not able to learn it and immediately apply it during that event that I'm at. But if I do lose some games, which is inevitable, hopefully I can take something away from it and then come back to prepare for whether it's another Road to Nationals or the next season of events or whatever the case is, take whatever that lesson might be and apply it to my preparation for whatever's next.
I think experience has always been an incredible teacher in Flesh, but I learned so much playing that first Road to Nationals that I don't think I would have learned just playing casual games. I think getting into it and actually playing against people who wanted to win made me a better player.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I learned from last year's Road to Nationals, because like we were talking about coming into those being a fairly new player, and since I was bouncing around from deck to deck trying to figure out what to play in CC, honestly, the biggest thing that I learned was what I should have done, even though I knew Levia wasn't the strongest deck in the format and probably wasn't gonna get me a first place. It would have actually served me better, and I would have had a more enjoyable experience if I would have just stuck with the hero that I knew and put my preparation time into refining my play on that deck, and then at least feel confident and comfortable going into those games. And even if I didn't perform highly, even if I didn't get in the top cut or whatever, I would still know that like I did everything I could and I played a deck I enjoyed versus jumping between. I think I played 3 different decks across 3 different Road to Nationals last year, and it was terrible. And the one that I did play Levia on, because I had been bouncing between so many other decks by the time I actually decided to play her because I knew her, I wasn't practiced with her and I didn't know what I was doing, and it just was a super uncomfortable experience.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. And that goes a big thing into just having reps with the deck, and where Ogar said that he was practiced with something. Like I will play Alexi, and typically we've talked about Crass before is really good at like, okay, I'm going to come to the second cycle and probably like 3 turns, I'm going to see these cards again, or I'm just having that good photographic memory. I don't have that ability, but I've I play Lexi so much, and I've played it since the beginning that I pretty much know what my options are, and I have that muscle memory down to like, okay, I've done a three of a kind. I'm about halfway through my deck. There's a good chance that I'm going to see one of the other two three of a kinds, or maybe I'm going to get the Rain Razors. How many attacks have I played? I've done a lot of aggression. I'm probably going to start running into some ice or fusion stuff, where I've had a good mix, and maybe I have an idea of that's going to keep on. So
I was like, when I played Dory at the Calling, I think it was, I played the Dory. When I was at Prism, I remember, like, I was getting all my auras early, and she was respecting them and dealing with them. By the time we got to the end game, where it was like 1-1, I was starting to hit all my heralds, and she doesn't deal heralds very well. So I was starting to swing bigger and bigger every single turn. At the end game, it's the only, I think it's the only game I've played with Prism that I actually got the second cycle.
And I think that is something that is very notable to do. Is just like having that down. Like when you hit the second cycle, it's gonna happen. Like, is pitch stacking a skill that you're gonna have like even like a month into the game, or if you're 2 months into the game? Like, yeah, you may not, but I think that you'll have that down to know what you're gonna expect if you keep with the deck and play it as much as you can, and have more practice with one deck versus others. Thoughts from you guys?
One thing I would say is I think that different decks require different skills. And so if you know how you like to play card games, even if you're relatively new to Flesh and Blood, if you can communicate that to someone who is very familiar with the game of Flesh and Blood, they might be able to help you say, like, okay, well, if these are the types of skills that you want to flex in the game, this is the deck that's going to be best for you. If you have a photographic memory, if you know that you're going to want to play a long game and you're going to want to be rewarded for your patience, and you know those types of things about yourself, you're probably going to want to play something like Oldham. You're going to want to play something where you're rewarded for hitting the second cycle, potentially even third cycle, depending on the matchup, and know that you're stacking yourself into the combos you want. Or if you want to play fast and loose and you don't want to worry about what's happening in 6 turns and you just want to go, maybe you want to play Katsu, because you're going to shuffle your deck every few turns at least. There is no pitch stacking in that deck, so you're never going to be thinking that far ahead. You're just thinking, like, I'm going to pitch a couple blues to the bottom, then I'm going to shuffle and redistribute them, pitch a couple more blues to the bottom, and shuffle and redistribute them. So by the end of the game, I know I've got tons of resources and I can pay for everything I want to do. And like that's a totally different skill set, and I think that both are completely valid. So knowing what way you want to play the game and what type of skills you're interested in working on can really help you decide like what deck you're going to enjoy. Like, I thought I would enjoy Chain. A couple of times I convinced myself that, Chain is a deck that's going to work for me, and it just, both times I tried it and really put time into it, I realized like the skills required to play this deck and the way that this deck has to be played in order to be played well just does not mesh with my play style. And it was all a bunch of wasted time that I put into that deck because I needed to play a deck that fit better with the way that I play the game. And that's what constantly pushes me back to Briar. I just always come back to Briar, it seems like. That is just my deck. And I played a bunch of Ninja. I've been putting a lot of time into Fi because I really like him conceptually, but I'm still finding myself just coming back to Briar because it's the deck that just most fits the way that I like playing this game.
I was going to say, that speaks pretty well to the game in terms of the variety of heroes there are. So I think there's probably a playstyle that everyone can kind of relate to and find access to and do exactly what they want to do within this game. If you want to make board states, you can play Illusionist. If you want to just go with Rapid Fire, you have Ninjas, and there's just so much you can do. If you want to control the board, you have Ice and Guardians. There's a lot of options for a lot of different players, and I think that's just awesome.
And I would say too, with knowing your deck, Lexi doesn't block well. I'm gonna assume from what I've seen from Fi does not block well.
He does not block. He blocks terribly.
He's got equipment. He has equipment that has numbers on the little
that is
lower
true.
right corner. There are numbers.
Furnace is probably the best thing that came to Draconic Ninja, just because he's like, I have an equipment that won't break. Wow, what a glorious day.
You get to walk with it twice before it breaks. It's amazing.
Oh, I get it back? This is a birthday present for me.
Yes, 100%.
But I was going to say, Pi doesn't block unless he looks at his hand and he goes, this is poo-poo. Let's we're just gonna, like keep one card arsenal, draw it. Oh, those cards, these hands, amazing. Yeah, give me all the damage.
Mm-hmm. As a lot of the commenters like to say, the commentators like to say at the like the big events, like those guys like Tannen and all them, like just show me the receipt. I don't care. Do what you're doing. Tell me how much it is at the end of your combat chain. I'll write it down on my paper. It's subtracted from my life total, and then it's my turn.
Like I put
That's
my
every
hand down
Kano
and like,
matchup.
put the hand down. What's coming? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh,
That's my
need a
play
one more?
style.
Okay, cool. I'm at one. Let's go.
That is my play style.
So that is really big into that, into knowing like those heroes and other heroes like that. There are going to be heroes that can block a little better, and there are going to be heroes that can be more aggressive. And you really have to be able to calculate like, okay, how much damage is this hero going to deal to me? Am I going to be able to deal that damage back? Can I keep pressure on? Are they someone who's going to want to block? What kind of things am I going to play around them? So those are really key. And I think it's also... Sorry, I'll go on here. Anything else you guys want to say? I think it's also really key to know your meta. And when I say the meta, that is essentially the game of the game. Like, there were... So, one pro quest, I fought 4 chains. That's just the one I remember out of the last season. I run Lexi, and I made a call to put in Remorseless. And I think Remorseless is a fantastic card that's overlooked for any hero that goes wide. It is a sideboard. I don't play it. I wouldn't play it against Guardian. They're going to be better things. But if you play it against Chain, and Chain decides, I'm going to deal a bunch of damage, so I don't care. I'm just going to take it all. Well, everything you play, you're going to lose life. So know your meta. What you have is going to affect what you go into. If you are playing Oldhim and you know that you're going to fight 8 prisms in a row, probably going to have
Might be rough.
not a,
But then you'll eat the Fies alive.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you got to just pick your battles.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the important thing about knowing your meta, right? Like if you know that it's going to be nothing but Prism, even if you love Oldhim, it might be in your best interest to pick a deck that is still as close as possible to the style you want to play, but maybe has a slightly better matchup into the meta you know you're going into. Like, I mean, up here in Minnesota, when up to now, because Chain is finally living legend, you go to any of those major events in the Twin City metro area, you're going to play a bunch of Chains. There's going to be, 1 or 2 Lexis, and then you're going to see the odd Prism here and there. And like, so you kind of know like what everybody's going to be on. And there's a lot of players who, as soon as you see their name as that's who you got paired up with, you don't even have to have them flip their hero over. You already know what you're going to, because a lot of people here play the same thing all the time. So knowing like who's going to be at an event can really help you in a place like this, really help you determine like, what do I need to do? What do I need to prepare for? And I think that's the other really big piece of knowing your meta is making sure that you understand the way that your opponent's cards are going to interact with what you're trying to do. If you know...
Sorry. No.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say it's also like keep up with other locations metas as well, because you'll see if a Fi wins a road to nationals, everyone's going to go online and be like, where's his deck list? What was he doing that I wasn't doing? And people will change out stuff if they're like, if that worked for him against this hero, maybe it'll work for me, because that's my biggest obstacle at this moment is the hero that he beat in the finals. So you also have to keep an eye on who is winning what, because I know a lot of people weren't looking at Lexi, and then Yuki wins something and people are like, oh, I gotta see her deck list. Oh, she was doing this. That's insane. Yeah, I'm gonna build this deck list. So I think it's also like keep an eye on other tournaments that's happening before yours.
I think it was cool last year.
I was just gonna finish it. I was just gonna say that someone's gonna see that list and they're gonna tweak theirs.
Sure. So I remember last year too, like when Road to Nat season was starting, Katsu was doing really well. But then people realized how good Chain was.
Yeah.
and chain started taking over.
Well, it's
But
'cause
I remember teching for Katsu when I was first building a deck, and I'm like, oh wait, chains are starting to come up. I probably should start worrying about that. But so yeah, the meta can change. Like when you start seeing winning decks, the meta can change on a dime.
yeah. Chain is just a two-hand Katsu. He was like, "Oh, you're gonna banish one card per turn and play it? Well, I'll banish 5 and play them."
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point because I remember one of the biggest things that came out last year was when Matt Rogers won an event by running Flock of the Featherwalkers in his chain list, and lo and behold, every chain player, like dominoes falling, we saw every chain player one by one switched out their deck list to get those Flock of the Featherwalkers into their list, and everybody was playing it, so you knew this is now a tech that I have to worry about, and I have to know how that interaction works, and I have to know what it means for my matchup against Chain. It was the same thing if you were playing Chain. I remember there was a moment where everyone figured out how good Snag was into Chain, and it was like, oh, cool, now that somebody...
Snag was number 1 in everyone's list, and then overnight, people were like, "This is the worst card in the game. I hate Snag. Snag's garbage." And I was like, "What happened to literally last week?"
I remember playing Bolton, and I had in the sideboard 4 chain. I had Snags, Impenetrable Belief, and Chains of Eminence.
Chains of
Just for
Eminence
the chain
is
matchup.
another huge one because you play and you're like Seeds of Agony.
Absolutely. But then what you would do is you would say do the Chains of Eminence for the Seeds of Agony, so then they hold them in their banish zone, and then they come around to that big turn at the end where they've got 6 Seeds of Agony and a Rift Bind, and they play all the Seeds of Agony, drop the Rift Bind, and you go, cool, Snag. Now what? Because I played Chain for an event, and I had someone do that to me, and that was right... This was another aspect of me not being well prepared, is I had heard about the card, and I kind of vaguely understood what it did, but I was not ready for it to be played against me, because I wasn't familiar enough with my deck, and I wasn't familiar enough with what other people were doing to combat what my deck was trying to do, and it lost me a game completely because I set up for this huge Riftbind turn, and I did not get the huge Riftbind turn.
I think all this is really good to mention because there are a lot of different things that you'll see if you look online and you get deck lists. But I'm going to go back full circle again, that you need to play in a play style that benefits you as well.
Sure.
For myself, most people are just wired to have a certain play style. Now you can train yourself to have something different, but taking for can't talk right now. Yuki's list, for example. Oh my gosh. It was very aggro, firing off a lot of arrows. It took out the fusion. It was just something that I couldn't pull off because how I would think about the lines of play. Now, I was able to tweak that. It was a good format, and I was able to add in Polar Blast. I think Polar Blast is essential. So, and more ice cards for fusion. So Polar Blast fills that. But if I flip over a Polar Blast, there's a Frostbite. Play the Polar Blast. Well, there's Dominate, or you're paying a resource. I'm either getting a card out of their hand to fire off arrows, or it is dominated, and I come in with a fused Chilling Ice Vein. Well, I'm going to get an extra card out of their hand anyway, or they're going to choose to block more. So it kind of sets it up okay, this actually works for me. This is how I would do it. This is the sequencing that makes sense. And then I can kind of rely on these fundamental aspects of the deck to kind of tweak it. Now, I do kind of realize some glaring weaknesses in my style. I have a lot more fusion. I'm a lot more Frostbite heavy than Yuki's style. I have a harder time with Prism than I would with just her deck. I have a better time against other characters, but I have a harder time against Prism. And that's something I have to decide, is that worth it to sacrifice what I'm comfortable with to be better? And yes, there is a certain thing that I'll need to learn to progress it into that, but right now I haven't figured that out. But that's a work in progress.
Yeah.
Let's see, your individuality should shine in every deck you make. Even if you net deck, I feel like everyone still makes their own little tweaks just to add their little touch on the deck.
Even
I've
if you take Phoenix
looked at so many Prism decks, and I keep changing like a few cards here and there, and I'm still not. And now I'm definitely changing cards into Road to Nats, but I haven't figured that out yet. But we'll get there.
I think that's one of the biggest things, like, that helps you learn a character too. For example, I always liked Viserai conceptually, and I tried many times to build a Viserai deck, and they always fell flat. They always felt like it just didn't gel. It just wasn't quite there. And I was putting in all the cards I thought were super cool, that I thought like, oh, this interaction seems really, really good. Why is it not working when I play? And then when I decided to start saying like, okay, instead of trying to build my own Viserai deck and be this, island upon myself and do it all on my own, let's see what other people are doing. I was talking with another player who had a lot of success in the not the most recent ProQuest season, but the one right before that with Viserai, and he gave me his list. We had like a 2-hour long conversation about why each card was there, what he was doing with it, what his sideboard plans were, all of that. I took all of that information into my ProQuest, and I got top 4. And it was because I did exactly what he said with the list and played it the way that he wanted to play it. Then I was able to come back afterwards and say, cool, now I'm going to take his list and what I learned from that ProQuest, and I'm going to make some adjustments. And then I'm going to make some more adjustments. And eventually I started looking at other people's lists. And then I was able to finally go, okay, now I'm going to build my own Viserai list from the ground up. And I was actually able to build something workable. But it was because I put time into gaining that base level understanding of the character from the perspective of someone who already knew what they were doing, kind of being able to stand on the shoulders of a giant in that way, as opposed to, like I said, just trying to be an island upon myself.
You beat me to the giant shoulder line.
Yeah. I love that metaphor.
And I think what's really good in like looking at these cards too, there's something to be said for just how the decks interact. So I love Dash and I love Lexi. Those are the two that I primarily use. I would like to soon pick up Dramai. I'm playing around with how best to implement her, but going off that, if I do Dash, I know it's a damage race. I'm putting out numbers versus numbers. If I do Lexi, then I'm playing a different game because I have a lot of on-hit effects. So reload, granted, that doesn't affect my opponent, but it's an on-hit effect. Fatigue Shot, that's an on-hit effect. They get their first attack action card halved, rounded up. Remorseless is an on-hit effect. Blizzard Bolt, if it's fused, there's an on-hit effect. Chilling Ice Vein, if it's fused, there's an on-hit effect. Endless Arrow has a great on-hit effect that it just comes back to my hand, and I can keep up the magic with that. But knowing too, like, is my deck strictly about numbers? Somebody said it before. I can't remember who it was, but here that they said, just hand me the receipt, and I'll just calculate it off, and we're just gonna tally this up. Or are you gonna play a different game that, you're gonna frustrate someone with frostbites? You're gonna make it so they can't do anything, and you're just gonna chip away at them that way. And there's something to be said too, because I was big in the fighting game community beforehand, and it's a strategy. Like sometimes, like just playing lame, and like if you play Street Fighter and you stand back and you throw Hadokens all day, like your opponent's probably gonna hate you. If you just run away and Hadoken over and over, that's just the fireball straight at them. Your opponent eventually gets annoyed. They just try to get in. They're trying to do something, and then you go to punish that. So you're punishing their impatience. Likewise, there's something to be said for putting your opponent in a position where it's like, oh, okay, I don't want to deal with this anymore, and they're just decision fatigue sets in. So I think that's something to also impose on your opponents if you can. It's another good strategy.
It's one that works. It is one that works. On me.
I'll get greedy with Prism a lot. I'll get real greedy. But yeah, I've been punished for it. You learn.
Yeah. Well, as I was saying earlier, I'm a Cheerios Briar is still my favorite deck I have ever played in any card game I have played. I love that deck, and that deck was the epitome of give me the receipt and I'll come back and I'm just going to throw my entire hand out onto the board and add it all up and see how much I can do, and then I'm going to draw back up to 4 and do it again on my next turn, no matter what you think you're throwing at me. And so that was definitely my play style. Just get all these cards out, add them up, and do as much damage as I possibly can with maybe an on-hit effect every 3-4 turns or so. I'm just mostly worried about getting those big numbers. But yeah, so like knowing that that difference, like we've been talking about, knowing what the style is that makes sense for you. I could never play Oldhim. I would never be able to be successful with that type of deck. But there are people who can play that and do extremely well. And people think of it as a slow deck. I know people who can play that deck extremely, extremely fast, make the decisions like that. And it's a complex series of decisions, and the whole decision tree and all the branches that can go from it. But if you know what you're doing, you can play it quickly and really wear your opponent down.
I think the skill.
Yes. I can never play Oldhim. I was saying I can never play Oldhim. I don't have that kind of patience. I don't like too much blocking.
I don't even have the patience to play against Oldhim.
I literally had
a Pro Quest match where I was playing Dash, and I was like, okay, I think I'm going to get in the top 8. The Oldhim was like, yeah, I'm not going to win this. Just going to fatigue. It's like, anyway. Yep. I think there's one skill that gets overlooked at by people coming to card games. I know that I overlook it a lot. That's sideboarding. Sideboarding is something that I think is key. And Kayla has that look on her face like she wants to say something that's really important, but I don't know if that's
You just said it, and like I have a new little notebook that I write all my decks in, and it makes me really happy. But with the Dramai, like I have thought over Dramai since they announced her. Like before, like most of her cards were talked about, I was like, this is what I want to do with her. And so my Dramai list is actually a 54 card main board with the other cards, literally some go in for certain what I call on-hit heroes and others that are non-on-hit heroes. And then there's also a separate sideboard for specifically ice heroes, prisms, and rune blades. And then those will get put in with just those 3 matchups, including if they're on-hit or non-on-hit heroes. So it's literally branching paths that I write down in this book of how I'm sideboarding with her. Because I truly want to make her a really good hero for me. Like, I want to play her to the point that I'm like, I know every play method up and down and left and right. I'm very excited. I've been putting so much thought into this type of stuff. And it's like, it's more... Oh, sorry, Ben.
I was going to say when Prism LLs, I'm going to look into Dromai.
Yeah, because it's so different to me than being a Dorinthia player, because Dorinthia player is just, I swing sword. I swing sword again, I make sword big. And it's like, Dramai is all of these tiny increments, and I want to do that just to make myself a better player in this game of exploring this entirely 180-degree different hero. So I don't think there's anyone that can be more different than Dorinthia than Dramai.
I think you touched on a really important piece as far as the sideboard conversation goes. Know what your main board is.
Yeah.
And there are kind of 2 ways to do it, right? There's the way that I think it's probably a little bit more common, which is saying, like, this is my main 60 or 62 cards or whatever, and then I side these out and these in for specific matchups. Or, like you said, which I think a lot of players do, and I think a lot of the high-end players, a lot of the players who are performing really well in the big events are players who do have their, whether it's a 48 or 52 or 55 or whatever it is, that kind of that core of the deck, and then their little packages that say, like, okay, for these types of matchups, these packages are the ones that come in to make sure that this core that basically never changes gets modified in order to respond to whatever the matchup requires. And I think that can be a huge part of being able to get more wins in, is knowing, like, yeah, this is the core of my deck and never changes, so I know I can always rely on the lines that are in here. but also knowing like these are the packages I'm going to bring in and how they interact with the specific matchups that I'm going to bring them in for, and that can really put you. Because I think going into an event with as much comfort as possible and as much confidence as possible is going to help you enjoy that event a lot more than any other strategy. And having that kind of that, like you said, a notebook where you've written down, here's my deck, here are the packages and what matchups I'm going to bring them in for. That takes so much of the stress out of going from match to match, going like, did I bring these cards in? Did I take those out? Where was that card? I think I needed this card, but last time I played that hero, I didn't. No, having that, just knowing, these are the ones that I need to care about, and this is the only steps that I need to take to come in and have as high likelihood as possible of success in this matchup, can really put your mind at ease. I know that was a big lesson for me to learn in my journey of trying to get better at this game.
I just thought I was crazy because I tried like FabDB and like deck builders, and I just don't like them. They just don't work for me. And I was like, let me try writing it down. I started writing it down, and then I started making notes to it, and then I start scratching stuff out and writing other notes. And I was like, this works so much better from my way of thinking. And it's also like writing it down. I don't know. It just feels pleasing. Be like, I made a deck list. That didn't work out. Scratch that out. Maybe we should try this instead. And then I write notes of scenarios that if it worked or if it didn't.
I love that we have a little bit of variety in our local community. So like, there's so many cards that I've played in the certain one of our matchups that I realize I hate seeing them in my hand in that matchup. So it helps me really finesse my sideboard. Like I loved from Prismatic Shield. I had it in the main deck for a long time. Then I'm like, this is terrible against Viserai. I will never play this into Viserai again. So now you learn really quickly what you like to see against other heroes once you start playing them.
And I know like that there's a judge here who, before you will play, he's like, okay, what hero are you playing? All right. And then he pulls out I don't remember if he pulls out his phone or notepad, and he'll just like look at that and be like, okay, take this out, take this out, take this out, put this in, take this out, put this in, and like, it's literally like a minute. He just has it like wrote down like what he's gonna do, and that's good. I'm the chaotic evil of sideboarding. And then
you're just like 75 cards in.
No, I'm sideboarding. I usually start with like my whole deck, and then I'll whittle it down. Like, okay, are you playing multiple cards? Okay, you're probably gonna go big a turn, taking Remorseless out, or I may take Fatigue Shot out if you're not doing that. But I'll usually whittle it down as much as I can to 63 cards. But I want to have a balance of I need this many attack. I can't take all attacks out. I do want some instance and reaction, and some fusion. So it's a little bit of a balance that way. But I'll try to make it.
Write it down. You should write it down.
I could.
It's a lot of fun. I made myself too happy buying this notebook because it has refillable paper, and it has little folder spaces so I can put stuff in them. And I am too ecstatic about a notebook. That really shows that I'm growing up. Is that it's like I got 37 MPG today, and I almost cried. I was like, "This is great."
I think a lot of the sideboarding stuff is comfort level. Like before coming to Flesh and Blood, I played a lot of the Transformers TCG. And in that game, you have your main deck because every game is every match is best 2 out of 3. So you always have to present your main, whatever you registered as your main deck. That's what you play in the first game, and then you sideboard for the second game. And if it goes to a third game, you have the opportunity to sideboard again, based on what you've learned from the previous games. And so in my mind, what's comfortable to me is to say, like, this is my deck. So in Flesh and Blood, I always build a 60-card deck. And that's my deck. That is my 60-card deck. That is my main board. And that's comfortable for me to have in my head of knowing, like, if I wanted to, I could sit down with my main deck, my main board, and that is a legal deck that I could sit down and play. And then I have all the extra cards that I can say, like, if I need to, if it feels better for that matchup, or I've decided that it's better for that matchup or whatever, I can make those. But like I said, that's just what's comfortable to me. So I think that plays a big role too in how you kind of construct your deck and how you think of what you're going to present in the different matchups.
Yeah.
Any final words on Classic Constructed before we move to limited formats?
I think the biggest thing is just knowing your deck, knowing what matchups you're likely to see, and how your deck interacts with the cards that those decks are playing. And that's a lot. There's a lot there, but as long as you get the reps in and you practice and you stay consistent and you work on it, you're gonna know what to expect most of the time, and you're gonna have a lot more comfort and enjoy the events you're going to a lot more.
You need to understand your worst matchup and practice for it. You can
Yeah.
beat your worst matchup. It's completely possible. You just have to be a little more focused.
Yeah.
You just
Play-
recognize what it is.
Play your deck 1,000 times, and if you get to the point that you're like, I hate this card, take it out and try something else.
There you go.
Because clearly, if you get it in your hand and you're like, I wish this wasn't here, it probably is not pseudo to your deck.
Sure. Happens a lot. There's cards I'm already thinking of cutting and going into this season, but I got time to figure that out. Not much time, but time.
So we're going to move on to draft. And so a lot of this is not going to be necessarily the things you're going to learn, like this is specific to Uprising draft, but draft in general. Just taking these out, you get for draft, there are 3 packs that go around and around, and then you build a deck from it. So the one rule has changed, that there are 2 token slots. If there's a cold foil, you can take that out, but you cannot play it during the draft.
Yeah.
For sealed, it's legal beagle, but not for draft.
Yeah.
No.
But going into draft, what are some strategies that you guys have starting off?
See, I love draft, but I don't have a strong strategy in draft. How I play draft, I don't play draft well. But I just like looking at what are the first pack. I kind of look at what my bombs are, like what's the cards that are going to win me games, and try to get 2-3 packs that maybe I can get something like that. And if I get strong enough, like opening picks, I will just stick with that hero. I'm terrible at adapting to the table.
It's either I'm losing people or. Oh.
No, you're fine.
Yeah.
You just froze.
The entire world froze.
I'm just terrible. I'm terrible at adapting to the table is my thing, but I love playing draft.
I go kind of stir crazy inside when someone's like, "Oh, we're drafting. I'm gonna draft this person." I'm like, "What do you mean you're gonna draft that person?" It entirely depends on the cards. Like you cannot, without opening the packs, you cannot say you're going to be this person unless you're just literally the luckiest human being. But I go into it with, if I see this card, I'm taking it immediately. For Arya, it was deep blue 100%. I was like, if I see deep blue, I'm taking that card. I don't care if there is a majestic that I think the person next to me could really use, and I could be like, this could kill me. It's like, I'm going to pass them just an awakening in a sealed event. I'm not playing Oldham, but there's a deep blue here, and I'd much rather have that than take away an awakening from someone else. So I think it's like, in this format, make 1 to 3 cards that if you see that card, take it.
I do think that like in Arya and I think maybe even Uprising, I'm not sure yet, equipment is super important. Like I think in these 2 sets more than any other previous set, equipment is super important. There's some equipment that you just need to get an advantage on your opponent. Playing Dromar without Silken Form is really difficult. Silken Form's really good.
I played the sealed event, and my opponent he pulled a furnace out of his packs. And, that was really good. Did he use it for the pitch? No, he didn't have that lined up, but it was a block 2.
3 extra health.
It didn't mean the difference between him winning the game. I did win the game, but he lasted 2 turns extra because of that. And if I had a bad draw or something happened, like, he definitely could have came back.
Like, I think and I think it entirely depends on who you're drafting, but if you're going into it and you're like Arya, I felt was so easy because you could stick to one element until a point that you're like, all right, I'm going to switch gear. Because like for me, it was always like, I'm going to take these ice cards because I am more comfortable playing Lexi or Oldhim than I am playing Briar. And then if I was like 4 picks in and like a lighted up came up, I was like, all right, I'm going to take this lighted up. I'm going to start taking more lightning, and then I'm going to start taking more Lexi things. But if I was like going through and then it's like second pack, I get exposed to the elements. It's like, all right, I might run Oldhim right now, so let me start taking some Earth cards. Let me start doing this. And with Uprising, where you can still kind of do that, where if it's like, oh man, I have an Uprising pack 1. It's like if I take that, I have 2 options to go from. So I'm gonna take the Uprising, and then I'm gonna kind of just take really nice Draconic. Like I'll take Blaze Headlong. I'll take Stoke the Flames. And it's like, I'll take Inflame. And then you get to pack 2 and you're like, oh man, here's this really nice Invoke. Or here's a Double Strike. And it's like, all right, now I'm going to start taking Ninja stuff. Or I'm going to start taking Illusion stuff. And then for Icelander, it's like, if you start getting past just amazing blues, just start taking them. For her, it's like, take all the blues you can take, especially the blue ice cards.
Blue ice cards, yep.
I was gonna say that disruption for those 2 heroes specifically in sealed is detrimental. So it's hard to be like, I'm gonna draft this without actually seeing what's in front of you. We should have had a sealed pack, and you could have been like, all right, here's a pack, let's open it. What would you pick out of these? Because like, draft is just so situational.
It really is. So I think the most important thing that I've learned is that ability to stay open, because I've always been one with the tendency to say, this is my favorite hero in the set, so if I'm going to play limited, whether it's draft or sealed, I want to play that hero. You know, I came into Tales of Aria saying, I'm going to play Briar no matter what. I got lucky a couple times I played sealed where I said that ahead of time, and then I just happened to pull an amazing pool for Briar. That happened to me at the World Premiere in Vegas last year. And I did really, really well, but it was because I had some really good cards for her. But going into draft, like, it's a lot harder to rely on that. So you need to have that ability to, at least for the first, at least for the first half of the first pack, making sure you're staying as wide open as possible, and then watching what is consistently coming to you and what's not.
Yeah.
If you noticed right away that, all of the illusionist cards are disappearing, but you've got tons of ice stuff, or all the ninja stuff is still there, and both the illusionist and blue ice cards are gone, it's pretty easy to see what the table is doing. As long as you wait long enough for that pack to, those packs to really be getting around, you can kind of get an idea of what people are trying to push for. But then even then, when you've picked a couple of cards thinking, I am going to play this specific hero, you kind of want to keep in the back of your mind what types of things you've taken so far, and still have the ability to pivot, because it's possible. And I had this happen to me at when they did the Welcome to Wraith draft for the farewell event. The one that I went to, I really, really thought that we were almost to the end of the first pack, and I thought I was playing Katsu. Like, I really thought that that's what I was going to be playing. And then it became, I realized with the last few cards, like, we're down to the chaff that nobody wants now. And I've seen, like, a ton of warrior stuff. Nobody's playing Dorinthia. And if everybody else is already committed, and we're coming into 2 more packs left, and there's going to be 2 whole packs worth of cards, and everybody's already chosen something other than warrior, I have really good opportunity to pull some amazing warrior stuff over these next 2 packs. So even though I had already taken some ninja cards that were now going to be unplayable, I made a really hard pivot toward the end of that first pack, and packs 2 and 3 went full in on warrior cards and ended up with a really, really good pool because of it. If I had stayed on Katsu, I actually would have gotten screwed, because there were a bunch of people trying to play him, and it just wasn't obvious to me at the beginning of the pack. So staying open even after I thought I had chosen helped me a ton in that draft, and I ended up doing really, really well. and got into the top and did really well with that because of that staying open. So that's the biggest thing, is making sure that you maintain that flexibility. Unless you're just going to force a character no matter what, and you're willing to deal with the outcome.
And that's why the Aria draft experience has been my favorite draft experience post Welcome to Wraith, just because the elements allow you to kind of still stay open for at least 2 of the 3 heroes. I did love that feeling. Like you could go, like Kayla said, you can go ice cards and like kind of, you're still kind of hedging your bets a little bit, but now you have a card for 2 heroes that are it's pretty good.
Yeah. And it's like you can do that with any of the elements. It's if you're like, I really like the go wide of lightning, so you just take lightning cards and then you get into it and you get a flicker wisp and you're like, yeah, let's go. We're gonna start doing lightning briar. Or it's like you start going into it and you get the light 'em up or the frazzles and you're like, here we go. And even with Uprising, like they do have solid generics. Like you open it up and you get an erase face and you're like, well, bar's still open. What am I gonna do? And then you're gonna start drafting, and then there's always that story of I drafted this hero, and then last pack opened it up and got the legendary for a different hero, and now it's like you're too late. There's always someone who does it where it's like I drafted Hard Dramai, last pack pulled the Tiger Stripe. It's great. Life great.
There's also something to be said for being open to cards you would not see or you would not play in Classic Constructed. Or Construct, like Scar for a Scar. I think in Limited, Scar for a Scar is one of the best things that you can pull. Now, am I going to put it in my Constructed deck? Never.
Some decks.
Every Constructed deck, I always play Scar for a Scar.
Well, at least because he plays Briar, and Briar definitely plays it.
And Ninja.
Yeah, they're not blocking.
but no, I mean that's 100% true. That's the same thing. Like thinking of that Welcome to Wraith draft. I mean, I would never ever put a blue Razor Reflex in a Classic Constructed deck. So many better blues that give so much more value, and normally you would think blue Razor Reflex is either in your binder because you want it in your collection or you're throwing it away, right? Like you literally would never think of that card, but it literally won me the game that got me into the top 8 because I had a blue Razor Reflex and I was able to go over the top when they had 1 life left. And knowing that you're not playing those finely tuned decks, you're playing everybody else on the best that they were able to cobble together based on what was presented to them. So knowing that the value of cards is different in a limited pool than it is when you're building a Classic Constructed deck that's huge.
Yep. And one thing we could talk about, I think Kayla hinted at it a little bit, but there's also a thing called hate drafting. And that is you get to the point where you're like, oh, I see I pulled an Awakening. Yeah, no one's getting this. And maybe you're not playing Oldhim, but you're just putting that in there.
Well, other Oldhams aren't doing it either, so.
Yeah, no one's doing it now.
Yeah. Like, if there is... Like, I've received packs in Aria where it's like... I mean, I was like, I could take, like, this red Lightning Surge, or I could take this Sigil of Suffering, and a Briar cannot use that against me later. I think I'll just take the Sigil. And I think with Uprising, where there's just so many good cards, like Uprising to me is going to be a set full of hate, where it's going to be like, nah, I'm not letting them get this Frost Hex. It's like, I'm 100% Fi right now, but they're not getting this Frost Hex. We're not letting this happen.
I think some of the bombs in Uprising are fairly easy to spot. I think they stick out. Yeah. So it's a lot easier to hate draft. But as I said, I haven't drafted yet. It's just my feeling looking at it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that tends to be pack 3 for me. Is like,
sure,
I figured out what I'm doing pack 1. Pack 2, I made sure I have everything, the core of what I'm going to need to make sure that my deck is going to function the way I want it to. And then pack 3 is kind of just like filling in the gaps and playing keep away. Yep. Sure, I'm not playing this, but neither are you.
Yeah.
And there are 2 things that are very good to mention about that. One, with drafting, or you mentioned pack 2. That's typically you're going to have about 30 cards. Then you have 30 to 40. If you go up to 40 on your pack listing or card listing, draw whatever. If you go up to 40,
Cool.
that makes it longer to see the things that you might want in between. So unless those 40 all gel together, then that's going to kind of muddy the waters a little bit. But if you are dead 30 cards, like I got fatigued and I was 5 one time. Who did I go against? I think I went against Dramai. Yeah, I got fatigued out against the Dramai. And actually, that was the last game of that day. But I remember, like, I just put exactly 30 cards in it, and that it felt really bad. It feels bad to get fatigued. But also it feels bad to, like, have nothing work together. So you just kind of have to decide, like, what's your sweet spot on everything. Anything you guys think on that with deck size?
I definitely
after being go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, going into like uprising drafts, if you were doing one of the draconic heroes, I would not run lots of blues. I would fine tune your deck down to reds, maybe a few blues. But if you go up against the Icelander, then I would start putting.
After being fatigued by Oldhim plenty of times, I have started putting in as many cards as I can fit that still have synergy. I try to hedge my bets and put the most cards I can because fatigue feels so bad.
Yeah, I mean, there are going to be players in any draft, and or I should say, in any set. There are going to be people who find a way to build that fatigue deck, where they're just going to be picking the cards that have the best block value and block the most efficiently, and they're going to throw in 40 plus cards in their deck, and be willing to take whatever you can dish out and preserve their life total. Wait till you're out of threats, which is going to happen a lot quicker in draft than it does even in blitz. And then they're going to be able to just come back and have their way with you, essentially. Just toss you around like a rag doll because you don't have any way left to prevent anything they're doing, and you don't have any way to threaten them on your own turn. So knowing that that's a possibility, and making sure to plan for that is a really big piece also of playing in limited format, because you do only have 20 life. You only have, sometimes 30 cards or a little more, and those cards are not the most powerful cards. They're not the most efficiently defensive cards in the game. So, yeah, making sure that you're ready for fatigue, and trying to walk that tightrope between being prepared for fatigue, but also having a list that is tight enough that you can threaten your opponent on your own turn and try to get cards out of their hand and keep the tempo. That's a pretty precarious tightrope to walk, but it's where you want to try to be.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's one other important thing to mention with this. The ocean is your sideboard. Like, if you drew it, it's there for you to use. You can pick, like, if you have it set up to, like, you can switch heroes. You're not pigeonholed to, like, oh, well, I know this person's going to be good against Fi. Oh, you know what? I could probably go Dramai. I have enough Draconic cards. Just need to put a few of these in. Bam. Even the sealed event, I know of some people that, like, we talked about that with the voice that happened to him. Like, somebody knew, like, oh, he's playing such and such character. I'm going to go to Icelander and bring a completely new deck.
He did it at the not right time to do it.
Oh,
he did it.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So when in between rounds, you have 100% chance to sideboard, do whatever. But when you sit down and present heroes, you cannot switch heroes then.
Yep.
That's not a sideboard. That is just a deck swap.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
that was the cool part about it. Be a cool person and do it when it's legal.
I will go around, like, if I finish early, like, on the draft, if I finish early, I'll walk around and see, like, okay, what's everyone else playing? What are they going to do?
Sure.
Like, and be prepared for that.
Yeah, it is a pretty good idea. That's actually a really good point. It's a good idea to try, and obviously other people at the table might be pretty tight-lipped about what they're doing. I've drafted with people who will literally take their draft pool and go to the other side of the room and put with their back to everyone to build their deck and sleeve their deck up just so you don't see and get any information about what they were able to pull or what hero they're on. But if you can get information about what cards came out, like what the big bombs were, like if you're drafting Welcome to Wraith and you hear somebody say they got Glint the Quicksilver, you want to know about that and you want to be watching for that player and making sure that you're aware of that when you play against them, because that is an extremely powerful card in that format. And I'm sure it'll be the same thing in Uprising. You know, somebody pulled a legendary, you're going to want to make sure that you're watching out for what that legendary is going to mean for their deck. If somebody pulls any of the big bombs, if you know who has the erase face and you know who's got the thaws and who doesn't, especially if you're playing Icelander, that's going to be extremely important for how you strategize going into a game. So definitely something to really be paying attention to. If anyone gives you the opportunity to gain that information, definitely pay attention and take that opportunity.
I'm way too casual. I'll get a Majestic and say, "Ooh, I got this."
Right? Yeah, that happened
There
at
you
Welcome
go.
to Wraith. Guy was like, "Oh, I got Singing Steelblade."
Whatever.
I've heard Ben go during draft. Well, guess I'm running Prism today. He's like, man, all the Prism stuff keeps disappearing. Who else is on Prism? Remember, I was the only other one on Prism, so I was sitting there like, oh, okay.
I'm too casual. What can I say?
That's all right. Any final words for anybody wanting to prepare for Road to Nationals with Sealed, Draft, Classic Constructed?
And have fun.
Have fun.
Buy some packs, and when you crack them, lay them out and go, which one would I take as a first pick? Because that'll prepare you.
Pack one, pick one. Very important.
Yep. And then with the second pack, do it again. Like, open it up and just like, I'd probably take that one.
Yeah, and there are good videos, there are good resources on YouTube and places like that where you can watch high-level players drafting. You know, they did that at Nationals where they would follow one person in a draft pod and watch their entire draft experience. So you kind of got to see what they were picking and what order and what they were prioritizing versus what they were willing to pass on. And I know that there's been a couple of recent videos posted up by some content creators showing like, this is how I plan to draft this set, or, you know, they did a mock draft or a real draft and showed, you know, the whole process of these are my thought processes and these are the cards that I'm going to prioritize and what I'm willing to pass along. So kind of getting an idea of what other players are doing and understanding the strategies behind it can be really important if you want to try your best to win. If you're going to have a good time, which is also just as valid, then go have a good time. Pull cards that you think are good. Pull cards that you think are going to be good in your constructed deck, so you don't have to buy the singles. Whatever.
I've done that before. I'm like, I'm not playing this hero, but I actually need this card for a different deck, so I'm just gonna take it.
That's what happened in the Welcome to Raid. The guy's like, I'm not playing Dorinthia, but I took the Singing Steelblade because I need that for my Dory deck I'm building at home.
Yeah, and just play lots of games. Like, play against every single person you can find, you know. If you can play online with other people, do that. I don't, because I don't know how. I don't understand technology, but like, play as many games as possible, because just playing will help you learn and be better.
Oh, sure.
Couldn't agree more.
Final words.
You're all good.
Go team.
Go team.
This has been us.
Have fun.
This is us.
Go
Is
team,
that a
go
TV
sports.
show? This is us or something? Like a theme.
That is a show.
That's the TV show?
Is it a TV show?
It is a TV
Is
show.
there like a theme song to it? Should I just play like this is us?
I think it just has like a little like you know
Little
how
ditty?
Grey's Anatomy used to have an opening, and then
No, I
now it's
watched
just
it.
kind of like, okay.
I'm not a huge
I'm trying to
TV
think.
person.
Well, you know how like Doctor Who used to have an opening, and now they kind of just do no one? Seriously? Yo, who are
This is
you?
the man who didn't know Game of Thrones was a book series.
Yeah, I could not be surprised there.
I watched like one season of
You
Doctor
know-
Who, so I have no idea.
So you know how in Game of Thrones they have the opening sequence?
Yes.
In some episodes they don't do that. They just do like the big badum. I think This Is Us just has the big badum. There are people screaming right now, being like, "How are you not aware?"
I feel like
The Grey's Anatomy thing, that's fine. I watched it with my mom because that was the only thing she would want to watch on TV. But like the Doctor Who part, come on.
If you want to
This is
win,
a much
everybody
longer
play
conversation.
Prism. Have a great night.
I love Prism.
You might not
Exactly.
be wrong.
And you want to win, right?
I mean, I do, but I
There
just
you
enjoy
go.
playing Prism.
All right, play Prism. Play Ben.
I will do that.
Have a good one.
Play the hero Ben.
Play as Ben.
Play against me and you'll win.
Get a hat, wear it
Fair enough.
backward, call yourself Ben.
There you go. All right, Cannon. See you, everybody.
Bye bye.